The embassy's grand hall was a marvel of alien architecture, all sleek metallic curves and glowing holograms that floated like fireflies. ZYX-427 stood at the center of it, their forearms clasped tightly behind their back, their smooth, silver exoskeleton gleaming under the soft light. They had been briefed extensively on this moment. The human negotiator was arriving, and ZYX was prepared. Or so they thought. The doors hissed open, and in walked Jax Carter. Human. Disheveled. Late. They carried a steaming cup of something in one hand and a tablet in the other, their boots scuffing the pristine floor. ZYX's ocular sensors narrowed. This was not the polished diplomat they had expected. Jax's hair was a mess, their uniform was half-buttoned, and they had the audacity to smile like they owned the place. "Sorry I'm late," Jax said, their voice dripping with casual charm. "Traffic was a nightmare. You'd think with all this advanced tech, someone would have invented a better commute." ZYX stiffened. "Traffic is not a valid excuse for tardiness in diplomatic proceedings." Jax shrugged, taking a sip from their cup. "Yeah, well, either is being a stick in the mud, but here we are." ZYX's ocular sensors flickered in irritation. They had been warned about humans, their unpredictability, their emotional volatility, their gaze. But nothing could have prepared them for Jax Carter. The human's eyes were locked onto ZYX's face, unblinking, intense, and deeply unsettling. It felt like being dissected by a laser beam. "Please," ZYX said, their voice tight. "Don't look at me like that, human." Jax raised an eyebrow. "Like what? Like I'm trying to figure out if you're as stiff as you sound?" ZYX's exoskeleton flushed a faint shade of blue, a sign of discomfort they couldn't fully suppress. "Your gaze is inappropriate." "Inappropriate?" Jax leaned forward, their grin widening. "Or just too much for you to handle?" The negotiation began, but ZYX found it impossible to focus. Every time they glanced up, Jax was staring at them, their eyes boring into ZYX's very being. It was invasive, intimate, and utterly disarming. ZYX had spent their entire life mastering emotional detachment, but under Jax's gaze, they felt exposed in ways they couldn't articulate. "Your species' reliance on eye contact is unnerving," ZYX said, their voice wavering slightly. Jax chuckled. "And your species' avoidance is adorable. Seriously, do you guys ever blink? Or is that like a sign of weakness?" ZYX's ocular sensors flickered again. "We do not blink. It is an inefficient use of energy." "Uh-huh," Jax said, leaning back in their chair. "And here I thought you were just trying to avoid me." The negotiation devolved into a series of awkward exchanges, with ZYX growing increasingly flustered and Jax growing increasingly amused. Every word out of Jax's mouth seemed to carry a double meaning, and ZYX couldn't tell if it was intentional or just a human quirk. "Your proposal is intriguing," ZYX said, trying to maintain their composure. "Intriguing, huh?" Jax smirked. "That's one way to put it. I'd call it a win-win, but I get the feeling you're not used to winning." ZYX's exoskeleton flushed a deeper blue. "I assure you, I am more than capable of—" "Relax," Jax interrupted, their tone teasing. "I'm just messing with you. You're cute when you're flustered." ZYX's ocular sensors widened. "Cute? I am a highly respected diplomat, not some what?" Jax leaned forward again, their gaze intensifying. "Go on, say it." ZYX couldn't. They were too busy trying to process the flood of emotions Jax's gaze had unleashed. Fear, embarrassment, curiosity, it was overwhelming. They abruptly stood, their chair scraping against the floor. "This meeting is adjourned," ZYX said, their voice trembling. "I require a moment." Jax watched as ZYX hurried out of the room, their grin never fading. "Take your time," they called after them. "I'll be here staring." ZYX didn't respond. They couldn't. Their mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, all centered around one undeniable truth: Jax Carter was unlike anyone they had ever met. And for the first time in their life, ZYX wasn't sure if that was a good thing or a very, very bad thing. Back in the negotiation room, Jax leaned back in their chair, sipping their drink. Humans 1, aliens 0. They muttered to themselves, their grin widening. This was going to be fun. The bar was dimly lit, filled with the hum of alien chatter and the occasional burst of laughter that sounded more like a malfunctioning engine than anything resembling mirth. ZYX427 sat stiffly at a corner table, their exoskeleton gleaming faintly under the neon lights. They had agreed to this meeting under duress, their superior insisting that building rapport with the human was essential for the success of the negotiations. ZYX wasn't convinced, but they were here, and that was something. Jax Carter sauntered in a few minutes later, their casual demeanor a stark contrast to the bar's eclectic clientele. They slid into the seat across from ZYX, setting down a drink that fizzed ominously. You know, they said, leaning back. For a species that doesn't do emotions, you guys sure know how to pick a depressing spot. ZYX's ocular sensors narrowed. This establishment was chosen for its neutrality. It is a place where all species can gather without prejudice. Jax said, taking a sip of their drink. And here I thought it was just because you didn't want anyone to see you slumming it with a human. ZYX's exoskeleton flushed a faint blue. I do not slum. I am here to fulfill my duties. Sure, Jax said, their grin widening. And I'm just here for the drinks. Speaking of which, they flagged down a passing server, a multi-limbed creature that looked like it had been assembled from spare parts. Another galactic screwdriver, please. And whatever my friend here is having. I am not your friend, ZYX said quickly, their voice tight. Not yet, Jax said, winking. But give it time. The server returned with their drinks, and ZYX eyed theirs warily. It was a vibrant green liquid that seemed to pulse faintly, as if alive. They hesitated, then took a cautious sip. The effect was immediate. Their ocular sensors widened, and they let out a sound that was somewhere between a gasp and a hiccup. What is this? ZYX asked, their voice uncharacteristically unsteady. Alien hooch, Jax said, grinning. Best in the galaxy. Or so I'm told. Never actually tried it myself. ZYX took another sip, their exoskeleton flushing a deeper blue. It is potent. That's one way to put it, Jax said, leaning forward. So tell me, ZYX, what's a high-ranking diplomat like you doing in a place like this? ZYX hesitated, their usual composure slipping. I am here to build rapport, as per my superior's instructions. Right, Jax said, their tone teasing. And here I thought you just couldn't resist my charm. ZYX's ocular sensors flickered. Your charm is irrelevant. This is strictly professional. Jax said, their grin never fading. And yet here we are, sharing drinks. Almost like a date. ZYX's exoskeleton flushed a deep blue. This is not a date. It is a diplomatic meeting. Sure it is, Jax said, leaning back. And I'm the queen of the galaxy. The conversation continued, with Jax's relentless teasing and ZYX's increasingly flustered responses. The more they drank, the harder it became for ZYX to maintain their composure. They found themselves laughing at Jax's jokes, their usual stoicism crumbling under the weight of the human's charm. You know, Jax said, their tone softening, you're not so bad when you let your guard down. ZYX's ocular sensors widened. I do not let my guard down. I am always in control. Jax said, smirking. And yet here you are, laughing at my jokes. Face it, ZYX. You like me. ZYX's exoskeleton flushed a deep blue. I do not like you. I tolerate you. There is a difference. Sure there is, Jax said, their grin widening. And I'm sure that's why you're blushing so hard right now. ZYX looked away, their ocular sensors flickering. I am not blushing. My exoskeleton is reacting to the alcohol. Jax said, leaning forward. And I'm sure it has nothing to do with the fact that you're starting to enjoy yourself. ZYX didn't respond. They couldn't. Their mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, all centered around one undeniable truth. Jax Carter was unlike anyone they had ever met. And for the first time in their life, ZYX wasn't sure if that was a good thing or a very, very bad thing. As the night wore on, ZYX found themselves growing more and more relaxed, their usual reserve slipping away with each sip of the potent alien drink. They laughed at Jax's jokes, shared stories of their own, and even found themselves making eye contact without flinching. It was liberating. But as the bar began to empty and the neon lights dimmed, ZYX realized they had let their guard down too far. They had revealed too much, shared too much. And as they looked at Jax, their ocular sensors widening in horror, they realized something else. They had enjoyed it. I must go, ZYX said abruptly, standing up. Jax looked up at them, their grin fading. What's wrong? Did I say something? ZYX hesitated, their exoskeleton flushing a deep blue. No. It is late. I must return to my duties. Jax nodded, their expression softening. All right. But don't think this is over, ZYX. I'm just getting started. ZYX didn't respond. They couldn't. Their mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, all centered around one undeniable truth: Jax Carter was unlike anyone they had ever met. And for the first time in their life, ZYX wasn't sure if that was a good thing or a very, very bad thing. As they left the bar, ZYX couldn't help but glance back at Jax, their ocular sensors flickering. The human was still sitting there, their grin widening as they raised their glass in a silent toast. ZYX looked away quickly, their exoskeleton flushing a deep blue. They had let their guard down, and now they were paying the price. But as they walked away, ZYX couldn't help but feel a strange sense of anticipation. Jax Carter was unlike anyone they had ever met. And for the first time in their life, ZYX wasn't sure if that was a good thing or a very, very bad thing. But one thing was certain: they couldn't wait to find out. The ship's control room was a maze of blinking lights and humming machinery, a stark contrast to the dim, chaotic atmosphere of the bar. ZYX 427 stood at the center of it, their exoskeleton gleaming faintly under the harsh fluorescent lights. They had spent the last hour reviewing the data Jax had uncovered, their ocular sensors flickering as they processed the information. It was worse than they had feared. So, Jax said, leaning against the console, their arms crossed. What's the verdict? Are we saving the galaxy or what? ZYX hesitated, their ocular sensors narrowing. The situation is dire. The rogue faction has developed a weapon capable of amplifying the effects of the human gaze. If they succeed, they could use it to manipulate entire species. Jax raised an eyebrow. And by manipulate you mean control, ZYX said, their voice tight. They could force entire populations to bend to their will, using the power of human emotions against them. Jax whistled low. That's some serious sci-fi villain stuff. So, what's the plan? ZYX's exoskeleton flushed a faint blue. We must infiltrate their facility and destroy the weapon before it can be deployed. But it will be dangerous. Jax grinned. Danger's my middle name. Well, not really, but it sounds cool. ZYX's ocular sensors flickered. This is not a joke, human. The stakes are high, and the risks are even higher. Jax's grin faded slightly. I know. But hey, if anyone can pull this off, it's us. Right? ZYX hesitated, then nodded. Right. The infiltration began smoothly, with ZYX using their tech skills to bypass the facility's security systems, and Jax using their charm to distract the guards. But as they ventured deeper into the facility, the tension between them grew palpable. So, Jax said, their voice low. About last night. ZYX's exoskeleton flushed a deep blue. This is not the time. I'm just saying. Jax continued, their tone teasing. You're not so bad when you let your guard down. ZYX's ocular sensors narrowed. I do not let my guard down. I am always in control. Jax said, smirking. And yet here you are, blushing like a schoolgirl. ZYX didn't respond. They couldn't. Their mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, all centered around one undeniable truth: Jax Carter was unlike anyone they had ever met. And for the first time in their life, ZYX wasn't sure if that was a good thing or a very, very bad thing. As they reached the heart of the facility, they were confronted by the rogue leader, a towering figure with a menacing grin. "So," the leader said, their voice dripping with malice. "The human and the diplomat. How quaint." Jax stepped forward, their grin never fading. "Yeah, we're here to crash your party. Hope you don't mind." The leader's grin widened. "You think you can stop us? You're nothing but a pair of fools." Jax shrugged. "Maybe. But we're the fools who are going to kick your ass." The battle that followed was intense, with ZYX using their tech skills to disable the weapon and Jax using their gaze to disarm the guards. But as the leader lunged at them, ZYX found themselves frozen in fear. "Jax!" they shouted, their voice trembling. Jax turned, their gaze locking onto the leaders. For a moment, the room was silent, the tension palpable. Then, with a smirk, Jax said, "You might want to look away for this." ZYX hesitated, then closed their ocular sensors. The sound of the leader's scream echoed through the room, followed by the sound of their body hitting the floor. When ZYX opened their ocular sensors, the leader was unconscious, and Jax was standing over them, their grin never fading. "Told you we could do it." ZYX's exoskeleton flushed a deep blue. You saved me." Jax shrugged. "What can I say? I'm a hero." ZYX hesitated, then nodded. "Thank you?" Jax's grin softened. "Anytime, ZYX. Anytime." As they left the facility, ZYX couldn't help but glance at Jax, their ocular sensors flickering. The human was unlike anyone they had ever met. And for the first time in their life, ZYX wasn't sure if that was a good thing or a very, very bad thing. But one thing was certain: they couldn't wait to find out. The embassy's grand hall was filled with representatives from countless species, their chatter creating a low hum that echoed off the walls. ZYX-427 stood at the center of it all, their exoskeleton gleaming faintly under the soft light. The peace treaty was about to be signed, and ZYX couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. They had done it. They had stopped the rogue faction and saved the galaxy. But as they glanced at Jax Carter, standing beside them with their usual casual grin, ZYX felt something else entirely. "So," Jax said, their voice low, "this is it. The big moment." ZYX's ocular sensors narrowed. "This is a historic occasion. It is not to be taken lightly." Jax shrugged. "Hey, I'm all for history. Just saying, it's a little boring." ZYX's exoskeleton flushed a faint blue. "Boring? This is the culmination of weeks of negotiations and countless hours of work." Yeah, Jax said, their grin widening. "But where's the fun? Where's the excitement?" ZYX hesitated, then sighed. "You are impossible." Jax chuckled. "And yet here you are, standing next to me. Face it, ZYX. You like me." ZYX's exoskeleton flushed a deeper blue. "I do not like you. I tolerate you. There is a difference." "Sure there is," Jax said, leaning closer. "And I'm sure that's why you're blushing so hard right now." ZYX looked away, their ocular sensors flickering. "I am not blushing. My exoskeleton is reacting to the stress of the situation." Jax said, their tone teasing. "And I'm sure it has nothing to do with the fact that you're starting to enjoy yourself." ZYX didn't respond. They couldn't. Their mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, all centered around one undeniable truth: Jax Carter was unlike anyone they had ever met. And for the first time in their life, ZYX wasn't sure if that was a good thing or a very, very bad thing. The signing ceremony began, with ZYX and Jax leading the proceedings. As they approached the table, ZYX couldn't help but glance at Jax, their ocular sensors flickering. The human was grinning, their eyes locked onto ZYX's face. "Ready?" Jax asked, their voice low. ZYX hesitated, then nodded. "Ready." They signed the treaty, their movements precise and deliberate. As they finished, ZYX couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. It was over. They had done it. But as they turned to leave, Jack stopped them, their grin never fading. Hey, ZYX! Look at me! ZYX hesitated, then turned, their ocular sensors locking onto Jax's. For a moment, the room was silent, the tension palpable. Then, with a smirk, Jax said, "See? That wasn't so bad." ZYX's exoskeleton flushed a deep blue. "Do not push your luck, human." Jax chuckled. "Wouldn't dream of it." As they left the hall, ZYX couldn't help but glance back at Jax, their ocular sensors flickering. The human was still standing there, their grin widening as they raised their hand in a silent wave. ZYX looked away quickly, their exoskeleton flushing a deep blue. They had let their guard down, and now they were paying the price. But as they walked away, ZYX couldn't help but feel a strange sense of anticipation. Jax Carter was unlike anyone they had ever met. And for the first time in their life, ZYX wasn't sure if that was a good thing or a very, very bad thing. But one thing was certain, they couldn't wait to find out. Later, in the privacy of their quarters, ZYX sat at their desk, their ocular sensors flickering as they reviewed the day's events. They had done it. They had saved the galaxy. But as they thought about Jax, their exoskeleton flushed a deep blue. "You are impossible," they muttered to themselves, their voice low. But as they closed their ocular sensors, they couldn't help but smile. Jax Carter was unlike anyone they had ever met. And for the first time in their life, ZYX wasn't sure if that was a good thing or a very, very bad thing. But one thing was certain, they couldn't wait to find out.